The sky over Manhattan split like a wound made of light. Clark felt it before he saw it. A pressure in his ears, a wrongness in the air. Then the world around him went white, and the next second the white became blue sky, glass towers, and a river of traffic far below. He was falling. Not from a building, not from a plane, from nowhere. Wind hit his face. He turned in midair without thinking, like a reflex. His eyes snapped across the city in a fast sweep. He heard thousands of heartbeats, thousands of voices, sirens. A screen too close. Below him, a long bridge line buckled. Metal groaned. A loaded truck skidded sideways. Cars slammed into each other. On the street near the bridge entrance, something else moved with purpose, small, fast objects in a tight pattern. Drones. Clark's mind locked on the simplest thing first. People. He shot down. Not like a meteor, like a hand reaching for a falling cup, smooth, controlled. He caught the loaded truck by its frame before it crushed the first line of cars. The weight hit him hard, but his boots never touched the ground. He lifted it up and swung it sideways into an open lane. He set it down like it was glass. A child's cry came from inside a crushed sedan. Clark's head turned. His eyes saw through metal and smoke. He bent, placed 2 fingers under the twisted door, and peeled it back with careful strength. The child was strapped in, wide-eyed, shaking. "It's okay," Clark said, voice low and steady. "I've got you." He lifted the child out, passed them to a stunned woman nearby, and turned again. The bridge was still failing. He flew under the sagging section, braced both hands against the steel, and pushed upward. The metal screamed, but it rose. Cars stopped sliding. People on foot froze, staring down at him like he was a bright thing they couldn't understand. Above him, the drones dove. They were not normal police drones. Their shells had sharp edges. Their lights blinked in a pattern that looked like a code. They moved like they were all one mind. Clark lifted one hand, palm out. Heat vision flickered, not as a beam, but as a thin line. He sliced the first drone's wing joint without hitting anything else. It spun out and crashed into an empty patch of road. Another drone shot a burst of something that was not bullets. It was a net of dark threads that snapped through the air. Clark moved. To the people watching, he disappeared. To Clark, the world slowed, like someone turning down the speed of a film. He caught the net mid-flight and crushed it into a tight ball before it could touch a single person. More drones came. He didn't smash them. He didn't want pieces falling on heads. He flew above the traffic and clapped his hands once hard. The shockwave hit the drones like a wall. They wobbled, lost formation, and dropped into the river in a messy line of splashes. The bridge stopped groaning. Clark eased it down into a safer position, then shot up, scanning for the next danger. That was when he saw the other man. He had landed on the bridge's top beam like a shadow. Black cape, black cowl, a shape that looked like it was cut out of the night. He did not move like a person who had just fallen out of the sky. He moved like he had planned this landing. Bruce Wayne watched the scene with narrow focus. He did not stare at the flying man. He watched the pattern around the flying man. The bridge failure, the drone swarm, the timing. A test. Or a trap. He crouched near one of the broken drones that had skidded onto the bridge beam. He snapped off a small plate with a tool from his belt. Under it was wiring that did not match any military drone he knew. He held it close to his cowl. A hum, not loud, but steady. He pulled a thin scanner from his gauntlet and ran it over the drone's core. The scanner's screen flickered. Then the numbers on it flipped into symbols. Bruce's jaw tightened. "Okay," he muttered to himself. "That's new." Something moved in the corner of his eye. Not a drone. A flash of red and blue swinging between buildings. A teenager in a mask landed on the bridge railing with one hand, body balanced like a gymnast. He looked at the flying man holding up part of the bridge, then looked at the bat-shaped shadow on the beam. He froze. The masked kid said, voice cracking with surprise. "So, either I am dreaming, or the universe just smashed 2 comic books together." He shot a web line down, snagged a stuck car door, and yanked it open for a trapped driver. I mean, hi, he added, like manners mattered right now. I'm actually… Never mind. We can do names later. Bruce didn't answer. He watched the kids' webs. Organic? Synthetic? The tension on them was strong. The kid moved fast, but his breathing was heavier than it should be. He was strong. Not like the flying man, but strong. The flying man lowered the bridge beam with care, then rose into the air again. He saw the kid, gave a quick nod of thanks, and then his eyes scanned farther out. That's when the second wave hit. A line of armored vans rolled up from a side street, no police markings, but heavy weapons mounted on the roof. The vans stopped in a straight row, like a wall. The roof hatches opened, and the barrels turned, not toward the flying man, toward the crowd. Bruce's body went still. He felt the moment right before panic breaks loose. He heard it in the crowd's breathing. The masked kid saw it too. Okay. Nope, the kid said. That's bad. Clark moved first. He didn't fly at the vans. He flew in front of the crowd, right between the weapons and the people. He held both hands out, not to fight, but to block. Stop, he called. The weapons fired. Not bullets. A thick pulse of bright energy slammed into Clark's chest. It pushed him backward through the air. His boots cut a line in the asphalt. His cape snapped behind him. The blast did not burn him, but it had weight. It was like being hit by a fast-moving wall. He held his ground. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in focus. He felt the energy. It wasn't magic. It wasn't simple heat. It had a strange rhythm, like it was made to push something away, to push him away. Behind the vans, a man in a red and gold suit dropped from the sky with jets roaring. He landed hard on the street, one knee down, then stood up with his palms already glowing. His helmet turned toward Clark, then toward the masked kid, then up toward the shadow on the bridge beam. Okay, the armored man said, voice coming from speakers with calm confidence. Nobody panic. I know that ship has sailed, but try anyway. He lifted one hand and a bright scanner beam swept over Clark's body. The beam hit Clark's chest and did nothing useful. The scan screen on the armored man's wrist filled with error messages. He stared at it, then stared again, then tapped it like it was broken. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered. Your whole body is basically a science crime. The masked kid snorted. Welcome to my life. Clark looked at the armored man. I'm not here to hurt anyone. The armored man's helmet tilted. That's a good sentence. People say good sentences all the time. Bruce's voice came from above, low and sharp. The weapons aren't aimed at him. They're aimed at the crowd. The armored man snapped his head up. Excuse me? Bruce dropped from the beam, cape spreading, and landed behind one of the vans like he was made of smoke. He slapped a device onto the rear panel. The van's lights flickered. Then the roof weapon turned sideways by itself, like a puppet with its strings cut. Bruce yanked open the rear door. Inside was a control rig that looked too clean to be normal. It had a small core with the same steady hum as the drone. He pulled out a small tool and cracked the casing. A tiny symbol glowed inside. Not letters, not numbers. A shape that made his eyes want to slide away from it. He didn't let them. He grabbed the core and ripped it out. All the weapons on the vans went dead at once. Clark's shoulders eased. He turned to the crowd, making sure nobody was hurt, then looked back at the armored man. You're in charge here? Clark asked. The armored man's helmet retracted, revealing a face with sharp eyes and a half smile that didn't quite reach them. Tony Stark, he said. And no, but also yes. It depends on who's yelling. From the end of the street, black SUVs rolled in. Agents spilled out, fast and trained, and among them walked a tall man with one eye and a coat that looked like it had been through too many wars. Nick Fury's gaze locked on Clark like he was looking at a storm cloud. Then Fury's eye flicked to Bruce, and his expression changed in a way that meant he had already decided Bruce was a problem. Clark held his hands out again, palms open. We don't want trouble. Fury's voice was calm. That was the worst kind. Then you're doing a great job failing, Fury said. Tony took a step forward, trying to take control of the moment with words. Okay, everyone, relax. We've got unknowns, we've got weird tech, and we've got—" A circle of orange light opened behind the agents like a door made of sparks. A man in a dark cloak stepped through. His hair was streaked with gray at the sides. His eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Dr. Strange looked at Clark and Bruce and didn't flinch. He looked up at the sky, at the spot where the light tear had been, and his face tightened. "This isn't a normal arrival," Strange said quietly. Tony frowned. "What does that mean?" Strange's gaze returned to Clark. "It means reality didn't invite you." Bruce's hand tightened around the strange core he had pulled from the van. "Then who did?" Strange's eyes narrowed. "Someone who wants the universe to notice." And as he said it, high above the city, far beyond human sight, something in the dark between worlds shifted like a watcher turning its head. The facility was clean in the way only new money and fear could make something clean. The hallways were bright. The doors were thick. The cameras were everywhere, and they were not shy about it. Clark walked calmly beside the agents because fighting would only make things worse. He could feel every gun pointed at him. He could hear the nervous breaths behind the masks. He could also hear something else. A heartbeat that didn't change. Bruce was behind him, hands relaxed, posture loose. But Clark knew Bruce's mind was moving like a machine. Counting steps, counting exits, counting threats. Tony Stark walked in front, talking like he was trying to keep the air from snapping. "Okay, first things first," Tony said. "We're not doing the alien lands everyone screams, then somebody punches somebody thing. I have a schedule. Also, I like my building." "This isn't your building," Fury said. Tony didn't slow down. "It's emotionally my building." Clark glanced at the ceiling, then at the walls. He could see the wires and the steel beams behind them. He could see the hidden rooms. He could see the people watching through one-way glass. He stayed calm. He wanted them to understand that calm was not a trick. They brought them into a room that was big enough to be polite and still feel like a cage. There was a table. There were chairs. There was a glass wall on one side that could turn opaque with a button. Tony waved at the chair like a host. "Sit, please. Or don't. Either way, don't break anything. We just replaced a very expensive espresso machine down the hall." Bruce didn't sit. Clark did. Slowly. On purpose. He set his hands flat on the table so everyone could see them. It worked. A few agents loosened their grip on their rifles by a small amount. Tony stood near a console and tapped at it like he was playing a piano. "All right," Tony said. "Let's do a quick scan. Nothing invasive, just a hello from science." A thin beam swept over Clark again. The screen filled with more data than any person should be able to read. Then the data started to fight itself. Tony blinked. The machine beeped. Then it beeped again, louder. Then it simply displayed a message that was almost rude. "Unknown." Tony leaned closer. No, that's not a real answer. That's what you put when you didn't do your homework." He tapped the screen. It flashed. Then it showed a new message. Insufficient framework. Tony stared at it like it had insulted his mother. "Insufficient framework," he repeated. "Are you kidding me?" Bruce's eyes flicked to the scanner, then to Tony's hands, then to the small tremor in Tony's jaw. Tony was annoyed, but also worried. Clark tried to help. "If it helps, I'm not magic." Strange, who stood in the corner with his arms folded, said, "That helps very little." A door opened, and another man walked in. He was older than Tony. Broad shoulders, calm eyes. He had the kind of posture that said he had carried weight for a long time and did not complain about it. Steve Rogers. Captain America looked at Clark, then at Bruce, then at the room. He took in the guns, the cameras, the tension. Then he looked at Clark's face. "You the one holding up the bridge?" Steve asked. Clark nodded. "Yes." Steve stepped closer. Not too close, just enough to show respect without being careless. "Thank you," Steve said simply. That one word shifted the room. Agents still watched, but their fear now had a second shape beside it. Confusion, because fear made sense. Gratitude made things harder. Fury entered behind Steve, moving like a man who never stopped planning. He leaned on the edge of the table like he owned the air above it. "Let's get a few things straight," Fury said. You two dropped into my city out of a hole in the sky. There were drones, there were armed vans. Now there's a wizard in my hallway. So you'll forgive me if I don't accept we're the good guys as proof of anything. Clark held his gaze. That's fair. Bruce's voice came like a quiet blade. You didn't ask the right question. Fury's good eye narrowed. Oh? Bruce lifted the strange core he had taken from the van and set it on the table with care. Who built this? Tony's eyes snapped to it. He walked over, picked it up, then stopped, like he felt something wrong the moment his fingers touched it. That is not normal tech, Tony said. He looked at Strange. Is this you? Strange shook his head. It's not mystic, but it's also not simple. Tony frowned. So it's rude tech. Bruce didn't smile. It's a tag. Or bait. Steve looked between them. A tag for what? Bruce's eyes shifted to Clark for half a second, then back to Steve. For him. Or for the tear that brought us here. Clark's jaw tightened. He had felt it too. Not the tag itself, but the way the event had been too perfect. Too timed. Like someone had wanted him to be seen. Clark took a breath and kept his voice gentle. My name is Superman. Tony let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a cough. Of course it is. Clark didn't react. He had heard worse. Steve studied him. That's a title. It's what people call me, Clark said. Where I'm from. Fury's eye flicked to Bruce. And you? Bruce didn't answer. Tony raised a brow. Strong silent type. We have a few of those. Bruce looked at Tony. Your scanners won't help. Tony pointed at him. That is exactly what someone says right before they turn into a problem. Clark spoke before Bruce could. He's not a problem. He's careful. Bruce didn't correct him. That was almost a compliment. Steve pulled out a chair and sat across from Clark, like he was making a point that talking came before fighting. Tell me the short version, Steve said. Who are you really? Clark nodded. He kept it simple. Clean beats, no long speeches. I came from another world, Clark said. I was sent as a baby. I was raised by good people. I learned I had gifts. I decided those gifts should be used to protect others. I try to do the right thing, even when it's hard. The room stayed quiet. Fury watched him the whole time, looking for a lie. Tony watched him like he was a math problem. Steve watched him like he was a person. Strange watched him like he was a signal in a storm. And him? Steve asked, nodding toward Bruce. Clark glanced at Bruce. Bruce's face gave nothing. He's my partner, Clark said. He protects people in a different way. Tony's mouth twisted. Different way meaning dresses like a bat and makes everyone uncomfortable? Bruce's stare didn't move. Meaning I don't have his power. And yet, Tony said, you walked into my city and shut down an armed convoy in 10 seconds. Bruce answered in the same flat tone. You're welcome. Spider-Man was sitting on the edge of a counter near the door, mask off now, hair messy from swinging too fast. His eyes were wide as he looked from Clark to Bruce. Peter Parker had seen a lot of weird things. He had fought aliens. He had met gods. But this was different. This felt like a storybook stepping into his world. He leaned toward Clark like he couldn't help himself. So, Superman, you really do the whole save cats from trees thing? Clark smiled a little. If the cat needs saving. Peter nodded fast, like that answer fixed something in his head. Okay, that's good. Fury pointed at Peter without looking at him. Kid, why are you here? Peter raised both hands. You called all available heroes. I am an available hero. Also, I was on the bridge, and I'm pretty sure my brain would explode if I didn't get answers. Tony waved him off. He's fine. He's like a talking stress ball. Peter looked offended. I do not reduce stress. I added. Bruce's gaze moved to Peter for the first time. He noticed the bruises on Peter's knuckles, the tiredness in his shoulders, the way his jokes came out fast when he was nervous. A child trying to carry a world. Bruce didn't say it. He stored it. Strange stepped forward. There's another issue, he said. Everyone looked at him. Strange held up one hand. Orange light flickered around his fingers, not as a show, but like he was feeling the air. The tier that brought them here, Strange said, didn't close cleanly. Tony's brow furrowed. Meaning? Meaning there's a seam, Strange said. A weak point, and something out there can feel it. Fury folded his arms. What kind of something? Strange's eyes hardened. The kind that hunts mistakes. Tony rubbed his face. Cool. Great. Love that. Steve leaned forward. So what do we do? Bruce answered before anyone else. We find the source. Fury snorted. You can't even tell me your name. And you think you get to lead an investigation? Bruce didn't flinch. I didn't say I lead. He looked at Steve. You want trust. He wants control. He looked at Tony. You want answers. He looked back at Fury. You want a button. Fury's jaw tightened. And you want what? Bruce's eyes didn't leave Fury. To make sure your button doesn't become the first thing you press. Tony's mouth opened, ready to throw a joke like a shield. But Steve raised a hand. Enough, Steve said, firm but not angry. No one is throwing punches in this room. He looked at Clark. You're willing to cooperate? Clark nodded. Yes. I don't want to be a danger. I want to help. Steve looked at Bruce. And you? Bruce's silence lasted a moment too long. Then he said, I'll work with you. I'll also work around you if I have to. Tony pointed at him. That is the most honest threat anyone has ever politely delivered. Fury's eyes stayed on Bruce. You step out of line. Clark spoke, calm but solid. He won't. Bruce didn't look at Clark, but Clark felt the meaning anyway. Strange moved closer to the table and placed a small charm beside the Strange core. The charm glowed briefly. The core's hum changed. It got quieter. Strange exhaled slowly. This tech is not from your world, he said to Tony. Tony's face tightened. Then whose is it? Strange's answer was simple. Time, he said. Or something that pretends to own it. Far away, beyond this facility, beyond this city, a silent signal spread outward from the place Clark and Bruce had arrived. It was faint, but it was enough. In a place where seconds were shaped like tools, something noticed and began to move. The first sign of trouble came as a missing second. Peter felt it while he was swinging through the city at sunset, heading home because Fury had finally told him to go do homework or something. 1 second he was in the air. The next second he was still in the air, but everything else stopped. A bird froze with wings open. A car's wheels stopped turning mid-spin. A man's mouth was open in a shout that never finished. Peter's stomach dropped. His web line went slack because the building he had stuck it to was now frozen too. He tried to move. He could. Barely. It felt like running through thick glue. His body screamed at him to panic. He did not. He did what he always did. He talked. Okay, Peter whispered, voice shaking. Okay, cool. Time is broken. That's new. That's great. Then he saw them. Figures in sleek armor standing on rooftops and street corners like they had been waiting there the whole time. Their suits were pale and smooth, with thin lines that glowed in patterns that hurt to look at if you stared too long. They held rods that looked like batons. One of them raised a hand. A symbol appeared in the air, made of light. The same kind of shape Bruce had seen inside the core. Peter's throat went dry. A calm voice spoke, not through speakers, but through the air itself, as if the whole city was the microphone. Temporal breach confirmed, the voice said. Anomalies present. Peter looked down. On a rooftop 2 blocks away, Superman stood with his cape lifting in the wind that wasn't moving. He was staring at the frozen city, jaw tight. Batman stood beside him, already moving, already scanning, already thinking. Doctor Strange's orange portal snapped open behind them, sparks falling into the still air like slow rain. Tony Stark landed on the roof in his armor with a hard thud, then looked around and cursed. Okay, Tony said. Nope, not a fan of this. This is like someone paused the world and forgot to unpause it. Steve Rogers climbed up from a stairwell door, shield on his arm, eyes sharp. Fury's voice crackled through their comms. Report. Tony spoke fast. Time just did a weird thing. like a full-body freeze. We've got... He stopped. One of the armored figures appeared on the same rooftop without walking there. It blinked into place. Tony's hands lifted, repulsors ready. The figure didn't attack. It simply pointed its baton at Superman. A bright band of light snapped out and wrapped around Clark's chest like a belt. Clark's body stiffened for half a second. Then he moved anyway. He stepped forward, and the band strained, glowing brighter like it was angry. Tony's eyes widened. "You're moving." Clark's voice was calm, but there was a hard edge under it. "So are you." The figure's head tilted, like it was collecting data. Another voice spoke, this one closer, like it was coming from the figure itself. "Anomaly identified," it said. "Designation: Kryptonian class." Tony snapped. "Hey, we didn't say that word." The figure ignored him. "And human class with high tactical probability," it continued, baton shifting toward Batman. Bruce didn't flinch. He threw a small disc. It should have flown in a clean arc. Instead, it crawled through the air like it was pushing through syrup. It still hit the figure's baton. The baton sparked. The figure turned its head to Bruce again. Bruce's eyes narrowed. "Good. You can be distracted." He moved. To Peter's eyes, Batman wasn't fast like Superman. But he didn't need to be. He moved like he had already seen the next 3 seconds and decided where he wanted to be. He dropped off the far side of the roof into the frozen city. Clark looked down at the street, hearing something else now. He could hear it under the stillness. Panic. He could hear hearts that were trapped mid-beat. He could hear lungs trying to pull air that wasn't flowing right. He could hear people who were awake inside bodies that couldn't move. Clark's eyes hardened. "You did this to everyone," he said. The figure spoke again. "Containment required. Anomalies must be removed to restore stability." Steve stepped forward, shield raised. "You don't get to freeze a city and call it stability." More figures blinked into place around them. Strange lifted his hands. Orange shapes formed in front of him like glowing shields. Tony's helmet snapped shut. "Okay, we're doing this." Thor arrived like thunder. Lightning cracked even though the air was still. He landed on the roof, eyes blazing, hammer in hand. "What trickery is this?" Thor demanded. The time agents did not react with fear. They lifted their batons together. A wide field of light spread out in a circle, and the roof under their feet shimmered like heat. Clark felt the field press against him, not like a punch, but like a rule. A rule that said, "You do not belong here." He clenched his fists. The field pushed harder. Clark's boots scraped the roof. Tony stared at his suit's readouts. Numbers jumped. Then his screen flashed the same words again. "Insufficient framework." "Oh, come on," Tony yelled. "You cannot keep doing that." Strange's eyes narrowed. "It isn't trying to measure him," Strange said. "It's trying to label him." Steve looked at Clark. "Can you break it?" Clark's jaw tightened. "If I hit it too hard, I might break everything under us." Thor snarled. "Then let me strike." Clark shook his head quickly. "Not yet. People are below." Peter's throat tightened. He looked down at the city and realized how high the stakes were. This wasn't just a fight. This was a fight on top of a glass table with 1,000 people stuck under it. The time agents moved again. The field dropped down off the roof like a dome, spreading outward across the city. As it spread, more of the world froze. A helicopter above the river stopped in place like it had been pinned to the sky. Peter gasped. Guys? That helicopter is not supposed to do that." Clark's eyes flashed. He moved. He did not fly. He vanished. In the next blink, he was above the river, hands under the frozen helicopter's frame. The dome's edge touched him, and the pressure hit harder. It tried to lock his muscles. It tried to lock his breath. Clark forced air into his lungs anyway. He lifted the helicopter and moved it backward, inch by inch, away from the dome's edge. It was slow, not because he wasn't strong, because the field was fighting him with rules, not weight. He set the helicopter down on a rooftop, then shot back toward the dome. Peter watched him and felt small. Not in a bad way. in a "this is what real power looks like" way. On the street below, Batman moved like a shadow threading through a frozen crowd. Bruce's mind was cold and clear. Field, dome, emitters. Every system had a center. Every trap had an anchor. He scanned building corners. He watched the agents' blink patterns. He noticed small points where the air shimmered more than others. There, a device the size of a backpack sat on a rooftop ledge, pulsing like a heartbeat made of light. An anchor. Bruce climbed the fire escape, moving fast but controlled. He reached the roof edge and pulled himself up. 2 agents blinked into existence in front of him. Their batons lifted. Bruce threw smoke pellets. In normal time, smoke would billow fast. Here it poured slowly like dark paint. But it still blocked sight. Bruce slipped left, then right, then was suddenly under one agent's arm. He drove a compact electric strike into the agent's suit seam. Sparks. The agent stiffened. The other agent swung its baton. Bruce ducked. The baton hit the roof, and the roof surface turned pale under it, like time had been scraped thin. Bruce's eyes narrowed. So that's how they do it. He rolled, planted a grappling line, and yanked hard. The agent's feet slid just enough. Bruce kicked its baton hand. The baton flew. It did not spin fast. It drifted. Bruce caught it anyway. The moment his fingers closed on it, his glove sensors screamed. Not heat, not electricity. Something that felt like the edge of a knife pressed against reality. He shoved it away from himself and focused on the anchor device. He reached it and slapped a small tool against its side. His scanner fought the same way Tony's had, numbers turning into symbols. Bruce growled quietly. Stop being cute. He didn't need to read it. He needed to break its job. He pulled out a compact charge. Not a bomb, something that would fry circuits without blowing the roof apart. He placed it. Then he hesitated, because he saw something else. A second layer inside the device. A small core. The same hum. The same wrong symbol. A tag. A beacon. If he destroyed it, the tag might flare like a dying signal. If he didn't, the dome would keep spreading. He made the call. He pulled the core out by hand. Pain jumped up his arm, like touching a live wire that hated him. He gritted his teeth and held on. Then he threw the core into a sealed capsule and snapped it shut. On the rooftop above, the fight got louder. Thor swung his hammer into the dome's edge. Lightning hit the field and ran along it like veins. The dome held. It didn't shatter. It adapted. Strange lifted both hands and formed a spinning ring of orange symbols that cut into the dome like a saw. The dome resisted, as if it could feel him trying to rewrite its rules. Tony fired repulsors at the nearest agent. The blast hit and pushed the agent back, but the agent blinked and reappeared 2 steps to the left, unhurt. Steve threw his shield. It carved through the frozen air and slammed into an agent's baton. The baton shattered. For the first time, the agents reacted. Not with fear. With focus. More of them appeared. They weren't trying to beat the team with skill. They were trying to keep them busy. Clark returned to the rooftop in a blur, eyes sharp. How far is the dome? He asked. Strange's jaw tightened. 3 more blocks and it locks half the city. Clark nodded once. He looked down through the building, down through steel and concrete, and found Bruce's signal moving below. Clark's voice turned low. Batman found something. Tony snapped. He's down there? In the time glue? Steve's eyes narrowed. Can you get him out? Clark's answer was immediate. He doesn't want out. Strange's eyes flicked. Then we buy him time. Thor grunted. Time is the enemy. Then we hold the enemy, Strange said, and his hands moved faster. Peter swallowed. He didn't feel like a joke now. He shot webs at the agents, tying batons to the roof, trying to limit their movement. It worked. A little. One agent turned its head toward Peter and spoke in a flat voice. Minor anomaly. Enhanced human. Peter's stomach dropped. Hey, I am not minor. Tony barked. Kid, less banter, more not dying. Peter shot another web line. I'm trying. Clark took a breath, then flew straight into the dome's edge. The field hit him like a rule again. Stop. Clark didn't stop. He pushed forward, muscles tight, teeth clenched. The dome bent. It didn't break. It flexed, like it was learning how hard it needed to push back. Tony watched in shock. "You're pushing through." Clark's voice came strained. "It's trying to lock me." Strange's eyes widened. "It's learning your frequency." Clark's face hardened. "Then we end it before it learns." Below, Bruce finished wiring his device. He looked at the sealed capsule in his hand. The tag core. He could feel it humming through the casing, like it wanted to scream into the universe. He spoke into his comm, voice calm even through pain. "I found the anchor. It has a beacon inside. They're not just freezing time, they're marking him." Fury's voice came in, cold. "Marking who?" Bruce didn't answer that. He didn't need to. Clark heard it anyway. A flash of anger rose in Clark's chest, not at being hunted, but at the city being used. He held it down, because anger plus his power could ruin everything. Clark pushed harder against the dome, holding it back like a giant hand holding a closing door. Strange's hands moved, cutting, sealing, shielding. Thor struck the agents, hammer spinning, lightning cracking, keeping them away from Strange. Steve stayed in front, absorbing hits, refusing to step back. Tony fired at the dome's emitters, trying to overload the field without hitting civilians. Peter moved fast between it all, saving people who were at the dome's edge, pulling them back before they froze fully. Then Bruce triggered his charge. The anchor device didn't explode. It died. Its glow flickered, then went out. The dome above shivered. For half a second, the city's air seemed to gasp. Then the frozen world released. Cars jerked forward, birds flapped wildly, voices finished mid-scream. People stumbled, confused, alive. On the rooftop, the time agents all turned their helmets toward one point, toward Clark. Their leader, if there was a leader, raised a hand. A thin beam of light shot out and struck Clark's chest. Clark felt it latch onto him like a hook. Not pain, a connection, a tag. Strange's eyes widened in alarm. No. Clark reached for it, but his fingers slid through the light like it wasn't fully physical. Batman burst onto the rooftop from the stairwell, cape swinging, and threw the sealed capsule at Strange. "Contain this," Bruce said. Strange caught it, and the capsule glowed. Strange's face tightened as he poured orange energy around it, wrapping it in a spell like a lock. Tony stared. That thing was inside the anchor? Bruce's answer was simple. Yes. Steve stepped forward. "Can we remove the tag from him?" Strange's eyes flicked across Clark's chest. Not fast. The time agents began to blink out, one by one, like they were done. Tony shouted, "Hey, no, you don't get to pause my city and then just leave." One agent remained long enough to speak. "Data acquired," it said. "Next phase authorized." Then it vanished. The rooftop went quiet, except for everyone's breathing. Clark looked out at the city. People were stumbling, holding each other, looking up, not understanding what almost happened. He clenched his fists, then forced them open. Bruce stood beside him, gaze hard, jaw tight. Tony's armor hissed softly as he stepped closer, eyes fixed on the fading light mark on Clark's chest. "That wasn't a fight," Tony said, voice lower now. "That was a scan." Strange held the capsule in both hands like it was a live grenade. "It was a notice," he said. Steve looked at Fury through the comm. "They can do this again." Fury's voice came back, flat as stone. "And they will." Clark's eyes stayed on the skyline. "Then we'll be ready." Bruce didn't look at him. He looked at the places where the agents had stood. He looked at the scraped roof where time had thinned. His voice was quiet. "They wanted us to win," Bruce said. Tony's brow furrowed. "What?" Bruce pointed at the fading mark on Clark's chest. "That's the point." Clark's jaw tightened. He knew what it meant. Somewhere out there, someone had just learned how to find him. And the next time they came, it wouldn't be to test. It would be to take. The next day, Manhattan looked normal from far away. The sun hit the glass towers. The river moved. People walked like they always walked. But up close, the city still shook. There were videos everywhere, Phones held up from 100 angles. Slow-motion clips of a man in blue holding a bridge like it was a bent sign. Clips of the same man moving so fast the camera turned him into a blur. Clips of a dark figure on the bridge beams, cutting power to armored vans with quiet, sharp moves. The news anchors kept using the same words. Unknown. Unidentified. Not on any record. Potential threat. Potential miracle. Clark heard it all, even when he tried not to. He stood on the roof of a high building, looking down at the streets. His cape moved in the wind. His face was calm, but his eyes kept shifting, listening, scanning. People were scared, not just of him, of what the time freeze meant. He could still hear the memory of it, the trapped heartbeats, the panic inside bodies that could not move. He didn't want anyone to feel that again. A soft step came behind him. Not soft because the person was quiet. Soft because they knew how to enter without making a fight start. Steve Rogers walked up beside him, hands at his sides. No shield raised, no stance. Just a man. "You slept?" Steve asked. Clark gave a small shake of his head. "A little." Steve nodded like he understood. "Me too." They stood there a moment, watching the city. Down on the street, a group of people looked up. Someone pointed. Someone waved. Someone stepped back, like the sky might bite. Clark's jaw tightened. Steve saw it. "This place has history," he said. "We've seen heroes fall. We've seen heroes lie. People here learn to question symbols." Clark's voice stayed gentle. "Where I'm from, they question too. But they also remember what hope can do." Steve glanced at him. "Hope is good. It can also make people stop paying attention." Clark looked over, surprised. Steve's expression stayed calm. "I'm not telling you to stop being hopeful. I'm telling you to stay real. If you're here, people will project things onto you. They'll make you their dream or their nightmare." Clark stared down at the city again. "And if I leave?" Steve's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then the nightmare story wins." Clark's hands clenched. Then he forced them open. "I'm not here to be worshipped," Clark said. "I'm here to help." Steve's mouth lifted a little. "That's why I'm talking to you." A voice crackled in both their ears through the small comm device Fury had insisted they wear. Rogers, Superman. Fury's tone was the same as always. "Facility, now." Steve sighed once. "Here we go." Clark followed him without argument. He could force his way through any door in that building. He didn't. Because the door wasn't the real problem. The fear behind it was. Inside the facility, Tony Stark looked like he had not slept at all. His hair was messier than usual, which said a lot. His eyes had that sharp shine he got when his brain was racing too fast for his body. A large screen covered one wall. It showed maps, heat points, video clips. A glowing dot labeled with a question mark. Tony pointed at the dot like it had personally insulted him. "That," Tony said, "is a mark. On his chest. And I hate it." Fury stood near the back of the room, arms folded. A few agents stood along the walls, trying not to stare. Dr. Strange stood closer to the screen, hands behind his back, face tight. Bruce stood in the corner where shadows gathered. He was still in dark gear. No name given, no explanation offered. He watched everyone like they were all suspects. Peter Parker stood by a table with a paper cup of water, looking like a kid who had snuck into an adult meeting and couldn't believe nobody stopped him. Tony jabbed at another screen. It showed the error message from his scans. "Insufficient framework," Tony read, mock voice dripping sarcasm. "Like my machine is judging me." Peter raised a hand. "To be fair, the machine is right. Your framework is kind of a mess." Tony turned his head slowly. "Okay, Spider-Man, you're brave today." Peter shrugged. "I was frozen in time yesterday. My fear budget is empty." Steve stepped forward. "Focus. What do we know?" Strange answered first. "The time agents used a field. It behaves like a rule, not like a wall. It tries to define what belongs." Tony pointed at Clark. "And he doesn't." Clark stayed calm. "I didn't ask to be here." Fury's eye stayed on him. "And yet you are." Bruce spoke from the corner. They wanted him seen. Everyone looked at him. Bruce didn't react. He continued like he was reading a report. Bridge failure, drones, vans, all timed, all built to draw him into a public response. Tony frowned. So the bad guys wanted us to see Superman save people. Bruce's voice stayed flat. They wanted the world to react. They wanted data. Strange nodded once. A ripple, a signature, something a hunter can follow. Tony leaned forward, anger slipping into his tone. So we're a lighthouse now. Fury's jaw tightened. We're worse. We're bait. Steve looked at Fury. Then we don't panic and start treating him like a bomb. Fury's voice stayed cold. We treat everything like a bomb until we know it's not. Clark met Fury's gaze. If you think I'm the bomb, tell me what you plan to do. The room went quiet. Not because anyone was afraid of Clark's words. Because they were afraid of the answer. Tony broke it first, trying to make it sound like a joke and failing. I have thoughts, Tony said. Plans. Options. None of them are fun. But I don't like living in a world where an unknown can bench press reality. Peter blinked. Did you just call him a gin metaphor? Tony snapped his fingers. Yes. Thank you. Moving on. Steve's eyes narrowed. Tony. Tony looked back. What? You want honesty? Fine. If he goes bad, we lose. So we need a plan that's not hope he stays nice. Clark spoke softly. Hope isn't blind. It's a choice. Bruce's head tilted. Choice can change. Tony pointed at Bruce. And that's why you're scary. You're saying the quiet part out loud. Bruce didn't blink. You want a button. Fury wants a button. Everyone wants a button. The question is who holds it. Fury's eyes sharpened. Someone responsible. Bruce's reply came fast. Everyone says that. Steve raised his voice. Firm. Enough. We can plan for risk without making him the enemy. Strange stepped closer to the table. His hands hovered over a small, sealed container. Inside it, the core Bruce had ripped from the anchor still gave off a faint hum. I have contained the beacon piece, Strange said, but the mark on him is different. It's like a note written onto the fabric of time. Tony muttered, Of course it is. Clark glanced down at his chest where the mark had been. He couldn't see it now, but he could feel it like a mild pressure, like someone's finger pushing against him from far away. How long until they come back? Steve asked. Strange's face stayed hard. I don't know, but it won't be random. Hunters don't run. They aim. Fury looked at the agents. Lock down all data. No more public footage than what's already out. Monitor every unusual energy reading. Every time spike. Tony interrupted, pointing at Clark again. And we keep scanning him until the scanner stops being dramatic. Peter leaned in. Are you sure the scanner isn't just scared? Tony stared at him. Are you sure you don't want to go to school? Peter's shoulders dropped. I tried. They told me to write an essay about yesterday's current events. I almost threw up. Clark's mouth twitched. A small smile, gone quickly. Steve saw it. That tiny human moment. It mattered. Bruce didn't. He was watching the room's corners, the exits, the cameras. He noticed a small red light on a ceiling panel that blinked a half-second late. Someone was watching from another layer. He filed it away. Later, when the meeting broke into smaller groups, Tony cornered Bruce near a hallway. Bruce was about to slip away into the facility's blind spots. Tony stepped into his path like he owned the space. Okay, Tony said. We're doing this. You and me. No capes. No dramatic standing in corners. Bruce stared at him. Tony pointed at Bruce's chest, then at his own. We're both the plan for the worst guys. The difference is I make my paranoia shiny. Bruce's voice stayed calm. You want a conversation? Tony nodded. I want to know what you're thinking, because I watched you move. You're not a soldier. You're not an agent. You're something else. Bruce didn't answer. Tony leaned in. Also, you didn't tell anyone your name, which means either you're hiding a crime record or you're smarter than everyone else in this building. Bruce's eyes didn't change. Both are possible. Tony blinked, then gave a short laugh. Okay, you're fun in a scary way. Bruce stepped slightly to the side, trying to pass. Tony matched him. Here's the thing. I don't trust gods. I don't trust aliens. I trust systems. And your friend is not a system. He's a sun-powered walking question mark. Bruce's voice was quiet. He's a man. Tony's face tightened. He's a man who can move faster than my lasers. So forgive me if I don't feel safe with just, he's nice. Bruce finally looked Tony directly in the eyes. Then don't rely on nice. Rely on what he does. Tony scoffed. He does rescue. Today. What about tomorrow? What about when he's tired? What about when someone he loves dies and he decides the world needs fixing? Bruce's jaw tightened slightly. Then someone has to be there to remind him who he is. Tony's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, Tony looked like he wasn't sure if he was talking to a threat or an ally. And that's you? Tony asked. Bruce's answer was simple. Yes. Tony studied him. Okay, then here's my offer. We compare notes. You give me your read on him. I give you mine on the time tech. We build plans that protect people. Bruce stared at him for a beat. Then he said, You want to protect people. Good. Tony's shoulders eased slightly. Bruce continued, But if your plan starts becoming about control, I stop you. Tony's eyes narrowed. Same. Bruce nodded once, like that was acceptable. Tony pointed down the hall. Also, I'm calling you Batman until you give me something better. Bruce started walking. Tony called after him, That wasn't a question. Bruce didn't turn around. I know. Clark sat in a quiet room later with Steve again. This time, indoors, away from the skyline. A plain table, plain chairs, no cameras in obvious spots. Steve had fought for that. Clark appreciated it. Steve spoke first. How are you holding up? Clark took a breath. He chose words carefully. It's heavy, Clark said, being looked at like a weapon. Steve nodded slowly. I get it. Clark's eyes lifted. Do you? Steve's expression didn't change. I've been a symbol. Symbols get used. Clark's voice turned lower. In my world, I try to be something people can lean on. Here, it feels like leaning makes people want to push back. Steve sighed. This world is loud. It has scars, but it still has good people. Clark's gaze shifted, like he was listening past the walls. He heard a janitor humming. He heard a guard whispering to another about the bridge video. He heard fear mixed with awe. I don't want to be their fear, Clark said. Steve leaned forward. Then don't be. Keep showing up. Keep saving people. Let your actions speak louder than their theories. Clark nodded slowly. Then he asked the question he had been holding back. What if the time hunters use the fear? What if they make people turn on each other? Steve's eyes hardened. Then we don't let them. Clark's shoulders squared. I can handle a fight, he said. I can handle a monster. But politics, paranoia, it spreads. Steve's voice was calm. That's why you're not alone. Clark looked at him, a little surprised. Steve didn't smile. He didn't need to. You want to help? You help, and we'll handle the rest together. Clark felt something loosen inside him. A small knot he hadn't noticed. Thank you, Clark said. Steve nodded once. Don't thank me yet. Fury's probably writing 10 protocols right now. Clark's mouth twitched. I believe that. Far from the facility, in a place built like a fortress and a palace at the same time, Victor Von Doom watched the world react. He sat in a high room with tall windows. The sky outside was gray. The city below was quiet because it had been trained to be quiet. A screen showed the same bridge footage, paused at the moment Superman held steel like it was nothing. Doom's metal mask did not change expression, but his voice did. Interested, controlled, almost pleased. So, Doom said softly, a sunborn god and a shadow king fall into our world. A figure beside him, an advisor, spoke carefully. The Americans are panicking. Doom waved a hand. They always do. His eyes, sharp behind the mask, shifted to a second video clip. Batman ripping a core from the van. The way he moved, the way he did not hesitate. Doom tapped the screen. "This one," Doom said. "This one is the key." The advisor hesitated. "You think the human matters more than the Kryptonian?" Doom's tone turned colder. "The Kryptonian is power. Power can be measured. Power can be baited. Power can be challenged." He leaned forward. "But the human is judgment. The human is control. The human decides what the power does." He rose from his chair, metal cape shifting. "Prepare the channel," Doom said. "The channel?" the advisor asked. Doom's voice was calm and final. A message, not a threat, an invitation. The advisor swallowed. "To whom?" Doom's mask turned toward the screen again. "To the shadow," Doom said. "He will not trust a handshake. He will trust information." He paused. "And if he refuses, Doom will still learn." He walked away, and the room behind him felt colder. That night, Bruce did not sleep. He never fully did. Not when a city was on edge. Not when unknown tech had tried to write a label onto reality. He moved through the facility like he belonged there, and like he didn't care if anyone noticed. He found the camera blind spots. Some were accidental. Some were not. He paused near a hallway panel and listened. A whisper of electricity. A tiny pulse, that half-second delay he had seen earlier. He pulled a tool from his belt, popped the panel with 2 quick movements, and looked inside. A second device sat behind the normal wiring. Not Stark Tech, not SHIELD, standard. Something added. A watcher. Bruce's eyes narrowed. "Fury," he murmured. He clipped the device out, sealed it, and put it away. He didn't destroy it yet. He wanted to see who asked about it. His comm buzzed once. A private line. A number with no ID. Bruce didn't answer with words. He answered by opening the line and staying silent. A voice came through, smooth, careful, with a hint of pride. "Batman," the voice said. Bruce's body went still. Not because he was shocked. Because somebody in this world had just used the name. Bruce's eyes narrowed. "Wrong." A small pause. Then the voice continued, unfazed. "You are difficult to reach," it said. "That is admirable." Bruce's tone stayed flat. "Who is this?" "Someone who appreciates seriousness," the voice replied. "Someone who understands that your friend in blue will be used as a weapon unless you stop it." Bruce's jaw tightened. "You're assuming a lot." "No," the voice said. "I am observing. The world is already dividing into camps. Some want to worship him. Some want to cage him. Some want to kill him." Bruce's mind moved fast. He didn't focus on the words. He focused on the signal path, the delay, the location. Not from the facility. Not from the city. Farther. "State your purpose," Bruce said. The voice softened, like it was offering a gift. "Information. I know what hunted you. I know why it paused the city. I know how to build a lock that time cannot pick." Bruce's eyes narrowed further. "And an exchange?" A faint chuckle. "A conversation. A trade. And perhaps a partnership." Bruce's voice turned colder. "No." The voice didn't react with anger. It reacted with patience. "As you wish," it said. "But you will still need answers." The line clicked off. Bruce stared at the dead comm for a long moment. He didn't need a name to know the shape of the offer. A king. A schemer. A man who believed control was the same thing as safety. Bruce slipped the comm away and walked toward the training room where Clark stood alone, staring at a wall like he was listening to the whole world through it. Bruce stopped a few steps away. "Someone contacted me," Bruce said. Clark turned slightly. "Who?" Bruce's voice stayed calm. "A politician with armor. A threat wrapped in a gift." Clark's eyes narrowed. "Doom?" Bruce didn't confirm. He didn't need to. Clark's face tightened. "What did he want?" Bruce's answer was short. "Me." Clark's gaze sharpened. "And what did you say?" Bruce's eyes stayed on Clark's. "No." Clark exhaled. A slow release. "Good." Bruce watched him for a beat. Then he said, "They're going to make this personal." Clark's jaw tightened. "Then we stay ahead." Bruce nodded once. "We find the source." Clark's voice was quiet. "We do it without scaring the city." Bruce's reply was immediate. "We do it without letting the city die." Clark held his gaze. Different methods. Same goal. That mattered. And somewhere far away, in the dark between seconds, the hunters of time adjusted their plan. They had tested strength. Now they would test choices. Weeks of calm never truly came. Instead, there were days where the city almost felt normal, and then hours where it didn't. Clark kept showing up. Quiet rescues, big rescues, fires, collapsing scaffolds, a ferry engine failure, a storm cell that turned nasty fast over the river. He never demanded thanks. He never posed. He simply did the work. And every time someone filmed him, Tony Stark groaned and said, "Stop giving the universe free content." Tony made the gag worse himself. He kept trying new scanners, new sensors, new non-invasive tests. Every single one ended in some version of the same result. Unknown. One afternoon, Tony ran a scan again, and the machine simply displayed a smiling face icon, like it was mocking him. Tony stared at it, then shouted, "Did you just emoji me?" Peter, perched on a railing nearby, whispered to Steve, "He's going to start scanning his toaster next." Steve didn't even deny it. "Probably." Clark tried not to laugh. He failed once, quietly. Bruce noticed. He stored that too, because laughter meant Clark still had air inside him. It meant the pressure hadn't crushed him into something else. But Bruce also noticed the fear beneath the laughter. Every time Clark heard a siren, he moved. Every time Clark heard a scream, his body tightened like it was a command. Clark carried the city like it was a promise. Bruce knew promises could break people. So Bruce did what he always did. He built a case. Bruce did not want a mansion. He did not want fancy tools. He did not want Stark's help that came with a leash. He wanted a room. 4 walls. A door that locked. A place where the light was under his control. He found it in a forgotten corner of an old warehouse that SHIELD used as a storage site. He didn't ask permission. He didn't need to. He brought in only what mattered. A table, a laptop with no network, a small set of tools, a pinboard, paper maps, photos printed from public footage, a clock with a second hand. He watched the second hand like it was an enemy. Because time was the enemy right now. He had help, whether he asked or not. Natasha Romanoff appeared one evening like she had been there all along. "You picked a sad cave," she said, looking at the bare room. Bruce didn't turn. "You're in my space." Natasha's mouth lifted slightly. "So are you." Bruce finally faced her. "Why are you here?" Natasha shrugged, casual. "Fury said you're useful but dangerous. Tony said you're annoying. Steve said you're trying." She stepped closer, eyes sharp. "I wanted to see which one was true." Bruce's voice stayed flat. "All of them." Natasha nodded like she respected that. "Good. So what's your plan, Bat?" Bruce's stare stopped her. Natasha held up both hands. "Fine. No nickname. What's your plan?" Bruce pointed at a map of Manhattan. Small dots marked the dome's spread. Lines marked where the time agents had blinked in. "They used anchors," Bruce said. "They used line-of-sight points. They used a beacon core inside a control device." Natasha leaned in. "So you want to find where the tech came from?" Bruce nodded. Natasha's eyes flicked to another photo, a freeze frame of the symbol inside the core. "That symbol," she said quietly, "feels wrong." Bruce's jaw tightened. "It is wrong." Natasha glanced up. "Who else has looked at it?" "Strange," Bruce said. "Stark. They don't understand it yet." Natasha's eyes narrowed. "And you?" Bruce didn't lie. "I understand what it does." Natasha waited. Bruce tapped the photo. "It points, like a finger. It says, 'Here.'" Natasha exhaled. "So they can come back." Bruce's voice was cold. "They already are." Natasha's eyes sharpened. "What?" Bruce slid a small device across the table, the watcher he had pulled from the facility panel. Natasha picked it up, inspected it. "You took this from inside Avengers space." Bruce nodded. Someone is watching inside our walls. That means fear is already winning. Natasha looked at him for a long moment. Then she set the device down carefully. Okay, she said. We do this your way. Quiet. Fast. No drama. Bruce's eyes didn't soften, but his shoulders eased by a fraction. Good, he said. Peter showed up the next day with a backpack and too much energy for someone who had almost been frozen into a statue. He stepped into Bruce's bare room and blinked. This is depressing, Peter said. Do you want, like a plant? I can get you a plant. Bruce didn't look up from the board. No. Peter walked closer, peering at the photos. Okay. Wow. That's a lot of dots. Bruce stayed focused. If you're here to talk, leave. Peter's shoulders dropped a little, but he didn't leave. I'm here to help. Bruce's eyes flicked to him. Why? Peter swallowed. For once, he didn't have a joke ready. Because, Peter said softly, I was stuck. I could feel it. I could think, and my body wouldn't move. People were trapped like that because someone wanted to tag Superman. Peter's voice tightened, and he was up there holding the line anyway. Bruce watched Peter's face, reading the raw fear and the raw respect. Peter continued more quietly. Also because I know what it's like when adults make plans about you instead of with you. Bruce's jaw tightened. He understood that too well. He nodded once. You're useful. Peter blinked. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me, and I hate that I'm proud. Natasha smirked. Welcome to his world. Peter looked at the board again. So where are we going? Bruce pointed at a new set of photos. A shipment container, a port record, a small stamp in the corner. Not Manhattan, Bruce said. Not yet. We follow the money. We follow the tech. Peter squinted. Is that Latveria? Natasha's face went flat. That's Latveria. Peter whispered. Isn't that the place with the scary guy in the metal mask? Natasha nodded. Yes. Peter's eyes widened. Cool. Great. Love this. Bruce's voice stayed calm. He reached out to me. Natasha's eyes sharpened. What did he say? Bruce answered. He offered a lock that time can't pick. Natasha stared. That's not a normal offer. Bruce's eyes were hard. That's a trap. Peter raised a hand. So we're going into a trap. Bruce glanced at him. Yes. Peter swallowed. Okay. I'm going to text my aunt that I'm studying. Natasha snorted. Good lie. Peter nodded fast. I have practice. While Bruce built his case in the dark, Clark worked in the open. He flew above the city in daylight because hiding would only feed fear. He stopped robberies without breaking bones. He caught falling construction beams. He carried injured people to ambulances and stepped back before they could even say thank you. He avoided the facility unless Fury called. He didn't want to live behind walls. He wanted to live among people. One afternoon, a woman on a fire escape shouted, "Are you an alien?" Clark hovered near her window, keeping distance so she didn't feel crowded. Yes, Clark said. The woman's face tightened. Are you here to take over? Clark shook his head. No. Then why are you here? Clark hesitated. He could say, I don't know. He could say, an accident. But the truth felt deeper. He looked at the street below. Kids playing. A dog barking. A man selling fruit from a cart. I'm here, Clark said gently, because people needed help, and I could help. The woman stared at him, trying to decide what story to believe. Then she said, my son, he saw the time thing. He hasn't slept. Clark's chest tightened. What's his name? Luis, she said. Clark nodded. Tell Luis he's not crazy, Clark said. It happened. He felt it. And he's safe right now. The woman's eyes flickered. Right now. Clark held her gaze. I will do everything I can to keep it that way. She didn't smile, but she nodded once. That was enough. Clark flew away, feeling the mark on his chest like a distant cold finger again. He whispered to himself, come for me. Then he looked down at the city, but not through them. In Latveria, the air felt different. Even the wind seemed careful. Bruce, Natasha, and Peter didn't arrive loudly. They didn't fly into the capital. They didn't kick down a gate. They came like shadows, using old routes, quiet connections, and a safe drop point that Natasha had used years ago. Peter hated every second of it. He wanted to swing. He wanted to move. He wanted to be loud and fast, because loud and fast felt safer than quiet. But quiet was the rule here. They moved through narrow streets with gray stone walls. People watched from windows, faces blank. Soldiers in clean armor stood at corners, not aiming guns, but letting you know they could. Peter whispered, "This place feels like the whole country is holding its breath." Natasha whispered back, "It is." Bruce didn't speak. He watched patrol patterns. He watched camera angles. He watched the way a street vendor's hands shook even while he smiled. Control. From top to bottom. They reached an old building that looked abandoned. Natasha tapped a specific brick. A hidden door opened. Inside, there was a small room with dusty furniture and a single working monitor. It flickered to life on its own. A face appeared on the screen. Not a face of skin. A metal mask. Victor Von Doom's voice filled the room, smooth as cold water. "Welcome," Doom said. "I expected you." Peter's hair rose on his arms. I do not like how he says welcome. Natasha's hand slid near her weapon, but she didn't draw. "Doom," she said flatly. Doom's mask turned slightly, as if looking her over through the camera. Romanov. Still alive. Still useful. Natasha didn't react. "Why are you watching us?" Doom's voice stayed calm. "Because your world has changed. And because Americans are loud, your new gods crash through the sky and everyone screams. Doom prefers quiet." Bruce stepped closer to the screen, eyes hard. "You contacted me." Doom's tone warmed by a fraction. "Yes, I admire efficiency." Bruce didn't blink. "You offered a lock." Doom's voice lowered. "A solution," Peter blurted. "Okay, hi, excuse me, I'm Spider-Man and I just want to say that if your solution involves like trapping people in time bubbles or stealing Superman, we are not interested." Natasha shot Peter a look. Peter shrugged helplessly. Doom paused. Then to Peter's shock, Doom said, "You talk too much." Peter's eyes widened. "Yes, thank you. It's anxiety." Doom ignored him and spoke to Bruce again. "You have a mark on the Kryptonian." Bruce's eyes narrowed. "You don't know that." Doom's voice turned sharp. Doom knows what Doom needs to know. Natasha's face tightened. "You're involved." Doom's mask didn't change, but his voice did. "Involved?" "No." He leaned closer to the camera. "Interested?" "Yes." Bruce's tone was cold. "Then give me something real." Doom's answer came without hesitation. "Time hunters will return. Not with a field, with a bargain." Peter whispered, "Oh, I hate that." Doom continued, "They will offer your heroes a choice. Give up the anomalies or suffer continued disruption." Natasha's eyes narrowed. "And you want to be the one who stops them." Doom's voice was quiet. "Doom will stop them, because Doom does not allow invaders to treat this world as a playground." Bruce stared at the screen. "What do you want from us?" Doom's voice softened again, like honey over a blade. "You, Batman, understand that power must be guided. You understand that your friend's goodness is not a shield against reality." Bruce's jaw tightened. Doom was trying to put words in his mouth. Doom continued anyway. "Work with me. Share what you know, and I will share what Doom has built." Peter leaned toward Natasha and whispered, "He's like if a TED Talk was also a villain." Natasha whispered back, "Stop." Bruce's voice stayed flat. "No." Doom paused. Then Doom did something unexpected. He laughed once, a short sound, not joy, pride. "Good," Doom said. "A weaker mind would say yes." Natasha's eyes narrowed. "Then why offer?" Doom's tone returned to calm. "Because Doom learns from your refusal." Bruce stared. "You're using this." Doom's voice was simple. "Yes." The screen flickered. Before it cut out, Doom said one last thing. "Tell Stark this," Doom said. "His scanners will never read a star. Then the monitor went black. Peter exhaled like he had been holding his breath. Okay, so, that was horrible. Natasha looked at Bruce. He's playing a game. Bruce's eyes stayed hard. So are we. Peter blinked. We are? Bruce pinned a new photo to the board in his mind. Doom's confidence. Doom's wording. Doom's timing. And Doom's final line. His scanners will never read a star. Bruce understood what Doom meant. Clark was not just unknown. Clark was outside the rules Stark's tech was built for, which meant time hunters would not treat Clark like a person. They would treat him like a hole in math, and they would try to close it. Back in New York, the side quest became huge in a single hour. It started with a sound that wasn't a sound. It was a pressure in the air, like the city inhaled too hard. Strange felt it first. He stood in the sanctum's main room, hands already moving, eyes wide. A seam, he whispered. It's opening again. Tony was there because Tony had basically moved into the sanctum the moment Strange mentioned rules. Tony pretended he hated it, but he kept showing up with new gadgets and a very annoyed face. Tony looked up from a device he had stuck to the ceiling. Oh no, Tony said. Is it doing the thing where reality acts like a zipper? Strange didn't answer. He raised both hands. A circle of orange light formed in the air, and inside it, a view appeared. Not Manhattan streets. Orbit. A thin blue curve of Earth, and a tear of light above it, twisting like a wound in space. Tony's face went pale. That's above our planet, Tony said. Strange's voice was tight. If it widens, it becomes a door. Tony swallowed. A door for what? Strange's eyes hardened. Anything that can smell the seam. A booming sound hit the sky outside. Clark landed on the sanctum's rooftop like a gust of wind, face focused. He had heard the change in the air before it even formed a visible tear. He stepped down through the roof access, careful not to break anything, even though he could. Strange looked at him. You feel it. Clark nodded. It's like a pull. Tony looked at Clark's chest. Does the mark feel warmer? Colder? More? Evil? Clark's eyes flicked down. Colder. Tony muttered. Of course. Strange opened another portal. Thor stepped through, lightning crackling around him like it was part of his mood. Thor's eyes went to the orbit window and his face turned grim. A battle comes, Thor said. Clark's voice stayed calm. Then we stop it from reaching the city. Tony raised a finger. Yes, stop it. Preferably in space, with you being the main space puncher, and Thor being the other space puncher. Thor snorted. Dooming words for a mortal in metal. Tony shot back. I'm not a mortal in metal. I'm a... Strange cut in. Focus. He looked at Clark. If you go up there, do not touch the seam directly. If you tear it wider. Clark nodded. I won't. Tony pointed at Clark. And no heat vision into the cosmic zipper. Clark gave him a look. I'm not reckless. Tony's eyes widened. Buddy, you just flew into our world out of a hole in the sky. Reckless is kind of in the job description. Clark didn't argue. He just turned and walked back toward the roof. Thor followed, hammer in hand. Strange raised a hand. Wait. Clark paused. Strange's voice softened slightly. If the tear reacts to your mark, it may try to grab you. Clark's jaw tightened. Then it grabs me, not the city. Strange's eyes held his. That's noble. It's also what hunters count on. Clark's voice stayed steady. Then we outthink them. Strange nodded once. Good. Tony looked at Strange. Did he just inspire you? Strange didn't answer. Clark and Thor launched into the sky. Up above the atmosphere, the world went quiet in a way that made even Clark feel small. The tear hovered like a bright cut, twisting slowly. Clark stopped a safe distance away. He floated, watching it, listening with senses that reached beyond normal hearing. He could hear nothing from it. That made it worse. Thor hovered beside him, lightning pulsing faintly around his armor. What is it? Thor asked. Clark's eyes narrowed. A door trying to become real. Thor gripped his hammer. Then we close it. Clark nodded. We hold it. Strange will find the rule that seals it, Thor's mouth said. And if something comes through before then? Clark's face hardened. Then we push it back. The tear widened by a small amount. Not a lot. Just enough. Something moved inside the light. A shape. Not a body. Exactly. More like armor made of time tech, sliding out on invisible rails. Then more. A squad. They didn't drift like astronauts. They stood in space like space didn't matter. They raised their batons. A field began to form. Clark's eyes narrowed. No. The field spread outward, not around the city this time. Around the seam, like they were building a cage around the door. Thor lifted his hammer. Lightning crackled across the field. The field held. Then it changed color slightly. It adapted. Thor snarled. It learns. Clark moved. He didn't charge in like a bull. He flew along the edge of the forming cage, looking for the anchor points. The emitters. He found them as small bright nodes. He hit the first node with a quick, controlled strike. It shattered into light. The field flickered. The squad reacted, batons lifting together. A beam snapped toward Clark. Clark dodged. The beam curved mid-flight. Clark's eyes widened. It tracks, he said. Thor roared and threw his hammer, smashing through 3 batons in a line. The time agents blinked away, then blinked back, repositioned. Not to fight Thor. To keep their formation. To keep building the cage. Clark realized it fast. They're not here to win, he said. They're here to lock the seam with me inside the system. Thor's eyes burned. Cowards. Clark's face hardened. No, strategists. A baton beam snapped toward Clark's chest. The mark on him flared cold. For a second, Clark felt his muscles resist him, like gravity turned into glue. He forced himself to move anyway. But it took effort. A lot of effort. Thor saw it. It binds you. Clark gritted his teeth. It tries. Down below, Strange stood in the sanctum, hands shaking slightly from the strain of holding spells across distance. Tony hovered nearby in a small flying rig, throwing sensors through portals like he was fishing. Steve watched from a window, jaw tight, because he couldn't punch space, and that was the worst feeling for him. Strange's voice came through the comms, strained. I can seal the seam, but I need it stable. Hold it. Do not break it. Tony shouted. How do we hold a cosmic rip stable? Strange snapped. By not letting it widen. Tony blinked. That's not an instruction, that's a prayer. Strange didn't answer. He pushed harder. Up in space, Clark shifted tactics. He stopped hitting nodes randomly. He moved in a pattern. Fast, controlled. He struck 3 nodes in a triangle, then moved to the next set. The cage flickered in sections. Thor timed his lightning strikes with Clark's hits, hitting the same moment the field weakened. The time agents blinked, 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 trying to keep up. But Clark was faster than their repositioning when he wasn't fully bound. He used that. He baited a beam toward his shoulder, then twisted at the last instant so it hit a node instead. The node shattered. The field collapsed in one quadrant. Thor roared and slammed lightning into the open gap like a hammer to a crack. The tear shuddered. Inside it, something larger shifted. A silhouette like a man in armor, but wrong, like his edges didn't belong to this second. A voice came through the tear, calm and far-reaching. Anomalies, the voice said. Return. Clark's eyes narrowed. No. The voice didn't react to his tone. It didn't care. Return, it repeated, or this world becomes the battlefield. Thor snarled. We do not bow. The silhouette's head tilted slightly. Your defiance is noted, it said. Your timelines are fragile. Clark's jaw tightened. He held the seam's edge with careful force, not touching the bright center, just pressing the space around it like he was holding a door frame steady. Strange, Clark said through comms, voice tight. Now. Strange's eyes burned with focus. He raised both hands and drew a glowing circle in the air. Symbols spun around it like gears. He spoke a spell, not loud, but absolute. Orange light shot through the portal window, up into space, and wrapped around the tear like a net. The seam tightened. The silhouette inside moved forward, trying to push through before it closed. Clark pushed back. Not with rage, with control. He pressed the seam shut, like closing a heavy door in a storm. Thor added his strength by striking the edges with lightning at the same moment, forcing the tear's energy to collapse inward, not outward. The tear shrank. The silhouette's voice remained calm, even as it faded. "This is step one," it said. Then the seam snapped closed. Space went quiet again. Clark hovered, breathing harder than he wanted anyone to hear. The cold mark on his chest dulled, but it didn't vanish. Thor floated beside him, hammer still raised, as if daring the universe to try again. Clark looked down at Earth. He didn't feel victory. He felt a warning, because now he knew. The hunters weren't just finding him. They were learning how to use him as a handle on the door. When Clark returned to the roof of the sanctum, Tony was waiting with his hands on his head. Tony pointed at the sky like it owed him money. "We just had a time door try to open above the planet." Clark nodded. "Yes." Tony stared at him. "And you said no," to the cosmic voice. Clark blinked. "Yes." Tony turned to Strange. "He just says no to cosmic things, like it's a customer service call." Strange looked tired. It was not a conversation. It was a claim. Steve stepped forward, face hard. "They want you." Clark met Steve's eyes. "They want the mark. They want the breach." Bruce wasn't there yet. He was still coming back from Latveria. But Natasha was already on the comm. Her voice came through tight. "We confirmed Doom is watching this," Natasha said. "He offered a lock against time. It's a trap." Tony snorted. "Of course it is." Natasha continued. "But he also knows more than he should, which means other powers are moving." Strange's eyes narrowed. "Everyone can feel the seam now." Clark's jaw tightened. "Then we close it permanently." Tony's face hardened. "Or we build something that makes it impossible to reopen." Steve's voice was firm. "We do it without turning this into a prison plan." Fury's voice cut in, cold and final. "Too late. It's already a war plan." Clark stared into the distance. The city below kept living. People went to work. Kids went to school. Sirens wailed somewhere far off. They didn't know how close the sky had come to opening again. Clark's hands clenched, then opened. He made his decision quietly, inside himself. He would not let this become a war fought through civilians. Not if he could help it. And somewhere, in a place where seconds were tools, the calm voice that had spoken through the seam recorded one more piece of data. The Kryptonian would always choose the people first. That made him predictable. And that made him dangerous. Because the next time, the hunters would not bring a cage. They would bring a choice designed to hurt. 2 weeks passed. Not calm weeks. Just weeks where the sky did not split again. Manhattan still talked about the day time stopped. People argued in lines for coffee. People argued on trains. People argued online. Some called the man in blue a miracle. Some called him a warning. Most people didn't know what to call him, so they just said him and pointed at the sky when he flew by. Clark kept moving anyway. He built a routine because routine kept him steady. Morning meant listening. He hovered high above the city where he could hear sirens without being in anyone's face. If a call sounded bad, he went. If it sounded small, he waited and let the city's own workers handle it. He learned which fires needed him and which ones needed space. He learned which neighborhoods got nervous when he landed close. He learned to stop on rooftops instead of sidewalks. He tried to be careful with people's fear. He failed sometimes. A little kid waved at him near a schoolyard. Clark waved back. The kid smiled. The kid's mother pulled him away like Clark was a moving storm. Clark didn't get angry. He just felt heavy for a moment, then pushed it down and went back to work. He also kept an eye on the mark. It didn't glow anymore. It didn't burn. It didn't hurt. It felt like a cold thumbprint pressed on the world. And his body was the paper. Every so often, he would hear a faint wrongness in the air, like a room right before lightning hits. He would stop, listen, and wait. So far, nothing followed. So far. Tony Stark did not like so far. Tony treated so far like an insult. He tried to scan Clark every chance he got. He built a scanner that used sound waves. It said UN known. He built a scanner that used light. It said insufficient framework. He built a scanner that used a mix of everything, plus a little magic help from Strange that Strange pretended not to provide. It blinked, made a sad beep, and displayed a single word. Nope. Tony stared at it and whispered, "That is not a scientific measurement." Peter Parker, sitting on a lab stool like he lived there now, whispered back, "It feels accurate." Tony pointed at him without looking. "You're grounded." Peter said, "I am literally in a lab with gods and secret agents. Grounded is a myth." Steve Rogers, leaning against the door, didn't smile much these days. But he did smile once at that. Bruce didn't come into the lab often. He didn't want Tony's gear on him. He didn't want Fury's cameras learning his habits. But he watched from the edges when it mattered. He watched how Tony's fear came out as jokes. He watched how Steve's fear came out as rules. He watched how Fury's fear came out as buttons. And he watched how Clark kept choosing people first. Every time, even when it cost him. Bruce had built his own routine too. He didn't chase crime for the thrill. He didn't train because he liked pain. He built structure because structure kept chaos from winning. In the warehouse room, he had claimed, he pinned everything to boards. The time freeze map, the blink points, the drone cores, the baton fragments, the seam event above Earth. He ran patterns until they stopped being mystery and started being language. Time hunters blinked in 3 ways. Not one. They had a short blink for combat, a medium blink for placement, a long blink for escape. That meant they had limits. Limits meant they could be pressured, and pressure meant they could make mistakes. Bruce liked mistakes. Mistakes were handles. Natasha fed him bits of intel like she was tossing breadcrumbs to a fox. Peter fed him videos and public footage, because Peter could find anything if you gave him a laptop in 10 minutes. Bruce didn't praise either of them, but he kept them close, because they were useful, and because they were brave in the only way that mattered. They kept showing up. One night, Bruce sat alone in the warehouse room, looking at a photo of the symbol inside the core, the finger point shape. His comm buzzed. A secure line. Not Tony. Not Fury. Not Natasha. Bruce didn't speak. He opened it and listened. A calm voice entered the air like it owned it. "You have been busy," the voice said. Bruce's eyes narrowed. "Who is this?" "Someone who can remove the mark," the voice replied. "Someone who can send you home." Bruce's hand tightened slightly around the comm. "You're not talking to the right person." A soft pause. Then the voice said, "I am talking to the planner." Bruce's gaze shifted to the board where Clark's rescue routes were marked, not by street names, but by need, fires, collapses, flood points, places where fear spiked. "You froze my city," Bruce said. "I tested your world," the voice corrected. "Your world survived." Bruce's voice turned colder. "People suffered." "Briefly," the voice said, like it was nothing. "And now you understand the cost of refusing." Bruce didn't answer. He didn't argue about morals with someone who treated suffering like data. He asked the only useful question. "What do you want?" The voice grew smoother, almost polite. "Anomalies returned," it said. "The Kryptonian and the Bat. Removed from this timeline. The mark erased. The seam sealed." Bruce's jaw tightened. "And if we refuse?" The voice didn't threaten in a loud way. It didn't need to. "If you refuse," it said, "then your time will continue to break in small ways until your people beg you to hand them over." Bruce stared at the symbol on his board. He could almost feel the shape of the trap. "You're trying to turn the world against him," Bruce said. "I am giving your world a choice," the voice replied. Bruce's eyes hardened. "Choice made under pain isn't choice." The voice didn't react. "You have 24 hours to decide." Bruce's tone stayed flat. "I don't make decisions for other people." Another pause. Then the voice said, "That is why you will lose." The line cut off. Bruce stayed still for a long moment. Then he moved. Fast. He didn't call Tony first. Tony would panic and build 10 loud machines. He didn't call Fury first. Fury would lock doors and reach for the button. He called Steve, because Steve would listen before he acted, and because Steve would understand what a choice like that really was. Johnny Resenders and Old Impassable. Steve sat at a table in a quiet conference room when Bruce arrived. No agents, no cameras that Steve could see. Only Steve, Bruce, and a single plain lamp. Steve's eyes lifted. "You don't knock." Bruce stood. "We're out of time." Steve's posture tightened. "What happened?" Bruce told him, clean and short. "A message. A deadline. A demand." When he finished, Steve's jaw was hard. "They want us to hand them over," Steve said. "Yes," Bruce replied. Steve leaned back, thinking like a soldier who had been offered surrender dressed up as peace. "Do we know who it is?" Steve asked. Bruce shook his head. "Not for sure, but it's the same faction. Same voice. Same method." Steve's eyes narrowed. "Kang." Bruce didn't confirm. He didn't need to. Steve had heard the name from Strange before, in careful warning tones. Steve looked down at his hands. His voice dropped. "We can't do that." Bruce's face didn't change. "I know." Steve looked up. "Fury will argue." Bruce's voice stayed calm. "Fury always argues." Steve exhaled through his nose. "Tony will argue too." Bruce nodded once. "Tony will build." Steve's gaze sharpened. "And you?" Bruce's answer was simple. "I'll stop the trap." Steve stood. "We do this together." Bruce didn't say thank you. He just nodded. This expectivizer. Clark was mid-rescue when Steve reached him. A crane had failed. A steel beam had swung loose. People were trapped on a high platform, wind whipping around them. Clark held the beam steady with one hand while he moved workers down with the other, one by one, safe, calm. When the last worker reached the ground, Clark set the beam down gently and floated down beside Steve in a quiet stretch of street. Steve's face was serious. "We need to talk." Clark's eyes narrowed slightly. The air changed. Steve nodded. "They contacted us." Clark didn't ask who they were. He already knew the shape of it. "What did they say?" Clark asked. Steve told him. "A demand. A deadline. A promise of peace if Clark and Batman were handed over." Clark stood still while Steve spoke, not because he didn't feel anything, because he felt too much, and he refused to let it drive him. When Steve finished, Clark's voice was quiet. "I'm not letting them use this world," Clark said. Steve's eyes held his. "And we're not handing you over." Clark's jaw tightened. "They think they can make people hate me." Steve's tone was firm. "They can try." Clark looked up at the skyline. He could hear the city. He could hear worry building like thunder. "If the city starts to break again," Clark said, "people will get hurt." Steve stepped closer. "Then we stop it before it starts." Clark's eyes lowered. "If it comes to it, I can leave." Steve's face snapped hard. "No." Clark blinked. Steve's voice stayed strong. "You don't run because bullies threaten your friends. You don't give yourself up because someone says or else. That's not peace. That's ransom." Clark breathed out slowly. A small part of him wanted to say, "I can take it. I can handle it." But he had learned something in this world already. Handling it alone could be exactly what the enemy wanted. Clark nodded once. "Then we stop it." This explains it disassable. The Avengers facility became louder that night, even with all the soundproof walls. Tony walked in circles, throwing ideas into the air like darts. "They want the blue guy and the bat guy," Tony said, voice sharp. "Cool. Great. So we just, what? Pretend we didn't hear it? That's not a plan. That's denial." Fury stood in the corner, arms crossed, face unreadable. "It's a plan if we move fast." Tony pointed at him. "You mean move fast like build a cage fast?" Fury's eye narrowed. "If the cage saves the planet, yes." Steve stepped between them like a shield made of skin. "We are not caging allies." Fury's voice stayed cold. "Allies don't come with a time mark that can open doors above Earth." Clark stood near the center of the room, hands relaxed, posture calm, but the room's tension pressed against him like weight. Bruce stood off to the side, quiet, eyes moving. Dr. Strange entered through a portal, cloak flaring. Behind him came Reed Richards, taller than most, calm in the way only a man who had seen too much could be calm. Tony's eyes widened. Oh good, it's Stretchy Einstein. Love that you're here, no pressure. Reed didn't rise to the bait. He looked at Clark with open curiosity and no fear. I've reviewed the data, Reed said. Such as it is. Tony threw his hands up. It's not data, it's drama. Reed's mouth twitched slightly. It's unusual. Strange spoke, low and firm. The mark is a tether, not a leash yet, but it can become one. Fury's voice cut in. So remove it. Strange's eyes narrowed. If it were that simple, I would have done it. Tony muttered. Thank you. Reed stepped closer. We may not be able to remove it immediately, Reed said, but we can shield it. We can make it harder to lock onto, like hiding a signal inside noise. Bruce finally spoke, and we can use that noise to bait them. Everyone looked at him. Tony pointed. He said the scary, quiet thing again. Bruce ignored Tony. They gave a deadline because they expect us to panic. Panic makes us predictable. Steve's jaw tightened. So we don't panic. Bruce nodded. We set the field. We choose the place. We choose the time. Clark's eyes narrowed. They won't choose a place that keeps civilians safe. Bruce's voice stayed calm. Then we pull them away from civilians. Tony's brow furrowed. How? Bruce looked at Strange. The core you sealed. The beacon piece. It points. Strange's face tightened. I have it contained for a reason. Bruce nodded. Keep it contained, but bring it. Use it like a lamp inside a box. Let them see it, not him. Reed's eyes sharpened. A decoy signature. Tony stared. That is either genius or insane. Steve looked at Clark. Are you okay with being used as bait? Clark's jaw tightened. He looked at the floor for a single second, then back up. I'm okay with protecting people, Clark said. If this keeps them out of it, yes. Fury's voice went hard. And if this fails? Clark turned his head slowly toward Fury. Then I handle the part I can handle. Bruce added, cold and sure. And we handle the part he shouldn't have to handle. Tony exhaled. Okay, fine, we do it. But I'm saying it now. If my scanner says insufficient framework one more time, I'm throwing it into the sun. Clark said quietly, the sun is very far. Tony glared. Don't you start. Peter, sitting on a chair he wasn't supposed to be sitting on, raised a hand. Question. Steve sighed. Yes, Peter. Peter swallowed. Where do I stand in the bait plan? Because I'm not saying I'm a main course, but I am emotionally involved. Bruce looked at him. You keep civilians back. Peter's face fell. That's responsible. Bruce's voice didn't change. It's also hard. Peter nodded slowly. Okay. The sensors in the prison house. There's impressibly a build access singularity. They chose a place that was strong, controlled, and away from crowds. An old industrial stretch near the river, cleared under the excuse of hazard testing. S-H-I-E-L-D. Agents set up perimeter. Stark drones watched from above. Strange laid hidden circles that would only show when needed. Reed placed sensors like small stones, each one quietly reading the air. Clark stood in the center, still, cape moving in the wind. The sealed container with the beacon core sat inside a ring of Strange's orange light, hovering a few feet away. It was contained, but present, like a lighthouse in a locked room. Bruce stood in shadow under a broken overhang, watching angles. Tony hovered overhead in his armor, trying to look casual and failing. Steve waited near Clark, shield on his arm, eyes forward. Thor stood like a statue of war, hammer in hand, staring at the sky like he wanted the enemy to hurry up. Peter was farther back, crouched behind a wall, eyes on the empty street. His fingers flexed, ready to web anyone who got too close. Minutes passed. Then Clark felt it. A pressure behind his eyes, a cold tug at his chest. The mark woke up. The air in front of him folded, not tearing like last time, but folding like a page. A doorway appeared, smooth and clean, and out stepped a man in armor that looked like time-made metal, purple, green, and cold light lines that moved like living code. He walked like the world belonged to him. Kang the Conqueror looked at Clark with the calm of someone staring at a puzzle he had solved long ago. "Kal-El," Kang said. Clark's eyes narrowed. "That's not my name here." Kang's mouth lifted slightly. "Names are data. Data travels." Steve stepped forward. "You're not welcome here." Kang's eyes flicked to Steve like Steve was a note in the margin. "Captain Rogers," Kang said. A symbol, a fixed point. Impressive. Tony's armor hummed louder. "Okay, no. Don't do the creepy I know your homework thing. It's weird." Kang's eyes shifted to Tony. "Anthony Stark," Kang said. "You build machines to feel safe." Tony stiffened. "Wow. That's wow. Personal." Bruce stayed hidden. Kang's gaze slid over the shadows anyway, like he knew where Bruce was without looking. "And you," Kang said softly, "are the one who thinks he can outplan time." Bruce didn't respond. He didn't give Kang the reward of a reaction. Clark stepped slightly forward, placing his body just enough between Kang and the others. "You gave us a choice," Clark said. "It wasn't a real choice." Kang held out one hand, palm up, like he was offering something kind. "I can send you home," Kang said. "Both of you." Removed cleanly. "Your presence here creates fractures. I repair fractures." Clark's jaw tightened. "You create them." Kang didn't argue. "If you stay, this world suffers repeated disruption. Your people will fear you. They will turn. They always do." Clark's voice stayed steady. "Not always." Kang's eyes were calm. "You are hope," he said. "Hope is a flame. It attracts storms." Tony muttered, "He talks like a fortune cookie that wants to conquer the planet." Kang ignored him and looked at Steve again. "Hand them over," Kang said, "or the next disruption will not be brief." Steve raised his shield. "No." Kang sighed, as if disappointed in a child. Then, Kang said, "Observe." He lifted 2 fingers. The world did not freeze. It skipped. A half-second vanished. To Clark, it felt like missing a stair-step. His body corrected instantly, but the air was wrong. Around them, small points on the ground lit up. Not Strange's circles. Different points. Hidden anchors Kang had placed without anyone noticing. Bruce's eyes narrowed. He preloaded the field. The anchors flared, and a narrow time cage snapped into place around Clark like a clear box. Not the whole city. Just him. The mark on Clark's chest went ice cold. Clark's muscles tightened. His breath hit resistance. He pushed anyway. The cage didn't crush him. It held him like a rule. Stay. Tony fired at one anchor. The repulsor blast hit and bent sideways, like the air cheated. Tony's eyes widened. "Okay, that's unfair physics." Thor roared and swung his hammer into the cage. Lightning hit the clear wall and ran along it. The wall brightened. Then it adapted. Thor snarled. "It learns again." Kang watched calmly. "This is not a weapon," he said. "It is enforcement." Steve ran forward and threw his shield at an anchor point. The shield hit. The anchor cracked. The cage flickered. Clark felt the rule loosen for a heartbeat. He moved. Not out. Not yet. But enough to show them something important. He wasn't trapped like a normal person. Kang's calm eyes sharpened by a fraction. Bruce saw it. That surprised him. Bruce moved. He threw a small device across the ground. It landed near one anchor and pulsed a sharp, uneven signal. The anchor's light stuttered. Kang's head turned. "What is that?" Bruce didn't answer, because answering was slower than acting. Strange lifted both hands, orange light forming around the sealed beacon container. Reed spoke quickly, calm under pressure. "The cage uses his mark as the lock's key. We need to scramble the key." Tony snapped. In English. Reed didn't look at him. "Make the mark lie." Strange's eyes narrowed. "I can wrap it." Like hiding a sound inside another sound. Clark's voice came strained from inside the cage. "Do it." Kang lifted his hand again. The cage tightened. Clark's vision narrowed slightly. Not from weakness, from pressure, like being underwater. He took a slow breath. He forced calm into his body. Then he did what he always did. He listened. He heard Steve's heartbeat, steady and angry. He heard Tony's suit whine, stress in every motor. He heard Strange's breath, controlled, focused. He heard Bruce's movements quiet, precise. He heard Peter farther back, whispering, "Please don't let this go bad." Clark pushed his hands outward against the cage wall, not to break it with brute force. To test it, the cage responded by reinforcing wherever he pushed. It was smart. So Clark stopped pushing. He moved fast inside the limited space, changing points, changing angles, forcing the cage to chase him. That made it spend energy. Kang watched him, measuring. Tony, seeing the pattern, shouted, "He's making it work harder. Okay, that's actually smart." Steve threw the shield again, hitting the same cracked anchor point. It broke. The cage flickered harder. Thor struck the ground near another anchor, not at the cage, but at the support. The street fractured. The anchor jolted. Kang's eyes narrowed. "Clever," he said, as if it annoyed him. Bruce's device pulsed again, a harsh, uneven beat. The anchor lights stuttered in rhythm with it. Reed's eyes widened. He's introducing noise into their blink network. Tony blinked. "You mean Batman is making time tech lag?" Reed nodded once. "Yes." Tony stared, then shouted, "Okay, I officially respect the Bat guy now." Bruce didn't look up. Strange raised the sealed beacon container and spun orange symbols around it like gears. The container glowed, but it stayed contained. Strange's voice went low. "Hold him steady." Steve planted his feet and lifted his shield toward Kang. "You want him? You go through us." Kang's gaze settled on Steve. "I've gone through versions of you 1,000 times." Steve's eyes hardened. "Then you've wasted 1,000 lives." Kang's face stayed calm. "Lives are variables." Clark heard that and felt something cold in his stomach. Not fear. Anger. He held it down. Because anger would make him sloppy, and sloppy would make someone else bleed. Strange's spell snapped into place around Clark's chest like a second skin of light. Clark felt the mark's cold pressure shift. It didn't vanish, but it stopped feeling like a hook. It felt like a hand reaching through a wall and finding only smoke. Kang's eyes sharpened. For the first time, he looked annoyed. "You hide the tether," Kang said. Strange's voice stayed hard. "We don't play fair with kidnappers." Kang lifted his hand again, and Bruce's noise device hit its next pulse. Kang's field stuttered. Not fully, just enough. Clark moved. He shot forward inside the cage at the exact stutter, hitting the wall where it was weakest. The wall cracked like glass made of light. Clark didn't punch wildly. He struck once, clean. The cage broke. Air rushed back like the world exhaled. Clark was free. Kang stepped back half a pace, surprised again. Then Kang smiled. Not because he was happy, because he had learned something new. "So," Kang said softly, "you can be shielded." Tony pointed at him. "Do not say that like it's good news." Kang ignored Tony and looked at Clark again. "You are stubborn," Kang said, "and predictable." Clark's voice was quiet. "You think saving people makes me predictable?" "It does," Kang replied. "It is a lever." Clark's eyes narrowed. "Then don't touch the lever." Kang's hand lifted. The ground behind Peter's hiding wall lit up. Peter's eyes widened. Guys?" A micro-freeze bubble snapped into place around a nearby street corner where 2SHIELD agents were standing guard. They froze mid-turn, eyes open. Not dead. Trapped. Peter swallowed hard. He's doing it again. Clark's body moved before thought. He was at the bubble's edge in a blink. He pressed his hand near it, feeling the rule. He couldn't just punch it. He might shatter the wrong part and hurt the people inside. Kang's voice came from behind him, calm as a lecture. "Return," Kang said, "or I will place 1,000 of those across your city. Small, controlled, endless." Tony shouted, "You absolute..." Steve cut Tony off. Tony, focus. Clark stood very still. He felt the tug in his chest, not from the mark now, but from the moral trap. Save them, but saving them makes Kang stronger. Ignore them, and you become the monster they fear. Clark's voice was low. You're using people. Kang's reply was simple. I am using reality. Bruce stepped forward from the shadows for the first time, walking into open light. Kang's eyes flicked to him. The bat emerges. Bruce's voice was cold. You like choices. Here's yours. Bruce threw something small. It wasn't a bomb. It was a capsule. Strange's containment symbols were printed around it, copied and adjusted. Reed's math was etched into the edges. Tony's tech sat inside, humming. A decoy tether. The capsule flew toward Kang and burst into a controlled flare of signal. Kang's head snapped toward it on instinct. For a half-second, Kang's own system reacted. Because hunters always react to bait. Strange used that half-second. He lifted both hands and opened a portal directly beneath the microfreeze bubble. Not to move it. To redirect its rule. The bubble slid sideways through the portal and reappeared inside a prepared containment circle far away, in an empty, reinforced chamber. The agents inside were still frozen, but they were safe. Clark exhaled hard. Kang's eyes narrowed at Strange. You move my pieces. Strange's voice was sharp. They aren't your pieces. Kang's gaze returned to the decoy capsule, then to Bruce. You planned this, Kang said. Bruce's face didn't change. You announced yourself. That was your mistake. Kang tilted his head slightly. Mistake? Or courtesy? Clark turned and faced Kang again. No more, Clark said, voice firm. Kang's calm eyes locked on him. For a moment, it felt like two ideas were staring at each other. Hope. Control. Kang spoke softly, almost kindly. I can still send you home, Kang said. Both of you. No more fear. No more arguments. No more people freezing in streets because of you. Clark's eyes hardened. You're blaming me for what you do. Kang didn't deny it. Reality blames the anomaly. Clark stepped forward. Then reality can blame me while I keep saving it. Kang's mouth lifted slightly. A heroic answer. Clark's voice stayed steady. A human answer. Bruce's eyes flicked to Clark for a split second, then away again. He didn't say it, but the message was there. Good. Kang looked around at the group. Steve, shield raised. Thor, lightning ready. Tony, armor humming, fear turned into stubbornness. Strange, eyes burning with spell light. Reed, calm hands adjusting sensors. Bruce, quiet and unmovable. Kang's voice stayed calm, but colder now. This is not the end, Kang said. It is a measurement. Tony shouted, Stop measuring my planet. Kang didn't react. The doorway behind him opened again, clean and smooth. Before stepping back, Kang looked at Clark one last time. You will face a choice you cannot solve with strength, Kang said. Clark's answer was immediate. Then I'll solve it with who I am. Kang paused, as if that amused him. Then he stepped backward into the fold. The doorway closed like it had never been there. The anchors on the ground went dark. The air pressure eased. For the first time all night, the world felt like it belonged to itself again. Clark stood still, then turned toward the containment chamber portal Strange had left open in the air. Can you free them? Clark asked, voice tight. Strange nodded, breathing hard. Yes, carefully. Reed added, calm. And now we know the cage can be disrupted. Tony landed with a loud clank and pointed at Bruce. Okay, I hate saying this, but that noise device, that was beautiful. Bruce didn't look at him. It worked. Tony frowned. That is the closest thing to a thank you, isn't it? Steve stepped closer to Clark. You okay? Clark looked down at his hands, then up at the city skyline. I'm okay, Clark said. But he's right about one thing. Steve waited. Clark's voice was quiet. They'll keep trying to turn my choices into weapons. Steve's jaw tightened. Then we keep choosing anyway. Clark nodded once. Fury's voice crackled through the comm, colder than ever. "This changes things," Tony muttered. "Everything changes things." Fury ignored him. "The planet just got a time war knock on the door. I want protocols." Steve's eyes narrowed. "We will have plans, not cages." Fury's eyes sharpened. "We'll see." Bruce's gaze shifted toward the dark river. "You can argue later." Tony blinked. "He's right. I hate it." Strange closed the portal, sealing the last traces of Kang's presence. The night didn't feel peaceful, but it felt earned. And for now, that was enough. The zest of the precinct and tells of the sec. Over there's Ledor. A few days later, the city's noise settled into a new shape. Not calm, not safe, just adjusted. Clark still flew rescues, but now he also met with teams. He listened to plans. He spoke more, when it mattered. Not speeches, simple statements. "I won't hurt people. I won't be owned. I will help." Bruce stayed in the shadows, but he didn't hide from everyone. He met with Steve and Natasha, sometimes with Tony, when Tony could keep his ego from filling the room. Tony did not always succeed. One afternoon, Tony caught Clark in a lab again and tried one more scan. The scanner beeped, thought for a moment, and then displayed, "Star-like energy source detected." Tony froze. Then he slowly turned the screen toward Reed and Strange like he was showing a miracle. It read a star, Tony whispered. Reed adjusted his glasses. "It seems we finally gave your machine a framework." Tony stared at Clark. "Do you know how long I've waited to not be insulted by my own equipment?" Clark's mouth twitched. "Congratulations." Tony's eyes narrowed. "Was that sarcasm?" Clark said. "A little." Tony pointed at him. "I knew it. You're learning." Peter, sitting upside down on a ceiling beam, whispered to Steve, "He's becoming one of us." Steve, watching from the doorway, answered softly, "He already was." "Is big on a cesspool." On a quiet evening, Clark stood on a rooftop near the river, looking out over the city lights. He didn't hover. He stood like a person. The wind moved his cape. Far below, cars flowed like a steady stream. Sirens wailed in the distance, not as a crisis, just as life. Behind him, boots stepped onto gravel. Bruce stood in the shadows, cape hanging still. Clark didn't turn right away. He didn't need to. "They're going to come back," Clark said. Bruce's voice was low. "Yes." Clark looked out at the water. "And Fury will keep wanting a button." Bruce didn't deny it. "Yes." Clark finally turned his head slightly. "And Tony will keep building." Bruce's mouth barely moved. "Yes." Clark's voice softened. "And you'll keep watching them." Bruce's answer was simple. "Yes." Clark faced the skyline again. "Do you ever get tired of watching?" Bruce's silence lasted long enough to be honest. Then he said, "Sometimes." Clark nodded, like he understood. "I hear everything," Clark said quietly. "Every fear, every rumor, every person who says I'm a hero, and every person who says I'm a threat." Bruce's voice stayed even. "What do you do with it?" Clark's eyes lowered. "I remind myself, I'm not here for their approval. I'm here because someone needs help." Bruce's gaze moved over the city like he was memorizing every street. "Fear makes people dangerous," Bruce said. Clark looked at him. "Hope makes them brave." Bruce didn't argue. He just said, "Hope also makes them careless." Clark accepted that without flinching. "Then you keep them careful." Bruce's eyes flicked to Clark. "And you keep them from giving up." A small silence settled between them. Not awkward. Working. From the edge of the roof, a red and blue figure swung up, landed, and immediately tried to pretend he hadn't been listening. Peter cleared his throat. "So, not to interrupt the rooftop brooding club, but I just wanted to say, thanks." Clark looked at him. "For what?" Peter's voice got smaller. "For not making the world worse." Clark blinked once, surprised by the honesty. Bruce said nothing, but he didn't leave. That was his version of agreement. Peter scratched the back of his head. "Also, I brought a churro." Clark looked at the churro like it was a strange artifact. Peter hurried. It's not bribery. It's just, when everything is scary, sometimes sugar helps. Bruce finally spoke. Don't feed him on rooftops. Peter blinked. Oh my gosh, you spoke to me like I'm a real person. Bruce's tone stayed flat. You are. Peter stared, stunned, then whispered to Clark, I'm going to remember this forever. Clark took the churro carefully. He didn't eat it right away. He just held it, like he was holding a small piece of normal life. He looked back out at the city. Somewhere far above, beyond clouds and satellites and human eyes, the dark between worlds remained quiet. But quiet didn't mean empty. In that silence, something watched. Not with hate, not with love, with interest. And on a rooftop in New York, a man who could lift mountains and a man who refused to bend to fear stood side by side, making the same choice in different ways. The city kept moving. Life kept going. And whatever came next, it would not find Earth unready.